Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years, senior scientist, and podcast host of long-running shows like IronRadio. This is its sister show, in fact, where you'll get condensed 10-minute topics alliteratively linked to the day of the week, so you can subscribe and tune in only for the daily subjects that interest you. We have Monday, market news from the food world, Tuesday, trends in science, Wednesday, weight management tips, Thinking Thursday, if you like lecture time, and Fitness Fridays. The specific content will vary according to news that comes across my desk. Come on in. Welcome, everybody. Hey, it's good to be back. This is Lonnie Lowry, and after 12 years on the mic and then a year and a half away from that because of some work that I was doing, it's exciting to be back, and I want to take some of the lessons that we learned from IronRadio over those years and apply them here. Because I was responsible for the news blurbs that were at the beginning of the show, the strength and muscle sport news, it was usually nutrition in nature. I'm a nutritionist. That's what I was trained to do in school. So that's what we're going to do now. Each day of the week will be something different about food, science, and technology. We will have Fitness Fridays, so we can touch on that, but I want to leave that mostly for Phil and the guys over at IronRadio. Still, over the years, thousands of people came to rely on the news and a little bit of the education, if you will. So we're going to be back at it. And you know that I don't pod fade. This is not going to go away in short order. But watch for new things to come online as we add some things. Yes, maybe some Patreon or some type of support so we can keep paying the bills and that sort of thing. But really just here for that sense of community and education in an internet quagmire of excited amateurs that sometimes give bad advice. But we don't have a lot of time here, so we're going to get right to this week's news, and this has to do with markets, specifically regulation and what the FDA is doing that could affect food labels and what you see in the grocery store. Not every Monday will be regulatory type stuff like this. Sometimes it's going to be just fun trends, functional foods that are coming online and things that you may or may not, get a deep dive into. But this time it's about regulation. Monday market news from the food world. Okay, let's get right to it. These episodes are brief. I want to take you to FDA.gov. We're going to go right to the horse's mouth. FDA proposes to update definition for healthy claim on food labels. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see at least a screenshot of this, but we're going to dig into this little piece. What's new is as of November 28th of 2022, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is extending the comment period for the proposed rule entitled Food Labeling Nutrient Content Claims Definition of the Term Healthy that appeared in the Federal Register on September 29th, 2022. The new deadline for comments is February 16th, 2023. So they're extending this comment period because, as you might guess, when you try to define healthy with the breadth of people that are out there with different genes and lifestyles and microbiota and everything else, that's really quite tough. So they're going to be looking at this on average. The FDA is extending the comment period by 50 days in response to a request from stakeholders to allow additional time for interested persons to develop and submit comments. And then they go on to explain where you can go, regulations.gov, etc. Just highlighting a few things here, they say on a separate track, but related, the FDA is also researching a symbol that manufacturers could use on the front of the pack to show that the product meets the definition of healthy. Having a standardized graphic to show that a food qualifies for the healthy claim would support the FDA's goals of helping consumers easily and quickly identify packages that are healthy. Now, I think we need to keep in mind, because of individual differences, this may or may not perfectly apply to you. For example, they're targeting sodium as a negative nutrient, but some people that are on ketogenic diets, they may excrete extra sodium and it may be less of a problem for them, that sort of thing. So let's just take a look at this piece. Again, you could just simply Google FDA definition of healthy, and you can get to these FDA.gov web pages. Again, go to the .gov horse's mouth so you can look at this yourself. The proposed changes to the definition of healthy are aligned with the current nutrition science, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2020 to 2025, and the updated nutrition facts label. The FDA's approach focuses on ensuring that nutrient-dense foods, so again, nutrient-dense, so vitamins, minerals, perhaps protein per calorie, right? Dense, nutrient-dense, that help consumers to build a diet consistent with current dietary recommendations can qualify to bear the claim. As an example, to include the quote-unquote healthy claim on the package, a cereal would need to contain a certain amount of whole grains. To be honest, that's always rankled me just a little bit. Whole grains are not a nutrient, right? Protein is a nutrient. The various vitamins and minerals are nutrients. Whole grains are not. But again, they are part of this dietary pattern, so I get where they're coming from. So again, would need to contain a certain amount of whole grains to adhere to this, as well as limits for saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars. That seems to be where they're headed with this. And again, you could even make some debates about saturated fat affecting more people genetically than others as far as their individual response to raising their LDL, right, their quote-unquote bad cholesterol, or even that odd chain fatty acids from dairy. There's some interesting data suggests that they are not as atherogenic, right, as heart disease inducing as some other saturated fats. But in any case, fat is one on the label. Sodium, we've already touched on that. Usually, though, negative, right? When it comes to the Gen Pop, they're not sweating, they're not on ketogenic diets, whatever it might be. They're consuming too much sodium. And then added sugars. And you can look at the sugar intake across generations. Specifically, in fact, you can look at fructose. Some very disturbing stuff there. I once did a talk for some continuing medical education to some physicians, and we were looking at the data over the years at how fructose consumption much, much higher in the current generation than in the past. And, of course, that could have some issues because of the way it's metabolized, right? Those of you who are familiar with glycolysis and how it's regulated, fructose sort of gets around some of the rate-limiting steps and could lead to fatty liver and some other problems, especially in some persons. In any case, added sugars are on the list. But then they go on to kind of qualify this and say nuts and seeds, higher fat fish, such as salmon, certain oils, and I'm guessing they're thinking olive oil here, maybe canola, and water are examples of foods that cannot currently be labeled as healthy, but are part of a healthy dietary pattern. And again, that's what they're focused on, are some of these patterns. So that's the original website that came out with this extended period for public comment. But if you look at the links at the bottom, you could take this a little further. There's another page that's really more targeted at consumers. It's entitled A Fresh Take on What Healthy Means on Food Packages. And what's interesting here, there's a video, but it says the FDA is conducting research on that symbol, right, that's supposed to represent the healthy claim on the package. Again, so it can act as a quick signal to empower consumers to identify the right foods. I just think it's important to understand what it is that they mean by healthy. And again, that's why they're trying to open this up so everybody gets their say. I want you to think about what you might include. What would you put in a symbol that would go on a food label that would suggest it was quote-unquote healthy? Again, knowing how diverse people are, trying to think on average what's a good way to bring attention to something that's healthy. This page does go on to say that more than 80% of people in the U.S. aren't eating enough vegetables, fruit, and dairy, according, again, to the Dietary Guidelines for America 2020 to 2025. And most people consume too much added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium. And again, that's concerning because those are usually part of an unhealthy dietary pattern. So there's some practical stuff you may see coming down the pike from the regulatory and food market world. We'll see you other days of the week for other topics. Take care. The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.